I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole for June 24th, 2025 at 6:10 p.m. Attendance roll call.
Alderpersons Wolf,
Here.
Hamel,
Here.
Decker,
Here.
Bryce. Here. Schrader is absent. Dolge,
Here.
Madden. Here. We have a quorum present.
Thank you. Statement of public notice.
This meeting was noticed in accordance with the open meeting law on Friday, June 20th, 2025.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole from May 27th.
Move to approve.
Second. What?
Now, do you want to bring up what your question is?
What date are you looking at? The
I
27th?
don't, on page 2, it said that there was a consensus about the,
Consultant? To move forward with bringing a consultant forward?
right. I don't think there was a consensus on that. I don't recall us voting on it.
We literally asked if we have a consensus of it, and even Alderman Wolf, who was arguing against it, said he was fine with bringing it forward to the council with a resolution to approve it if, at least bring it forward to council. We weren't approving the actual hiring a consultant. We were approving bringing it forward to council with a resolution to debate and discuss an actual.
And we'd vote on it at that time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but there was, literally I asked it I watched the meeting this week again because you brought this up and I'm like, no, we literally asked, is there a consensus? And everyone here, with the exception of you didn't say no nor yes, but everyone else was like, yes, bring it forward. Okay. So, that's as much of a consensus as you can get.
Okay.
So, are we good?
We're good.
All right. All those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. New business. Discussion concerning proactive police department hire. Can I get a motion to get it on the floor at least?
Move to approve.
Second.
Chief. There's also a memo in your packet that if you've had a chance to review, otherwise it's in here explaining what the chief's going to talk about.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you're looking to see what I'm doing, it's in the memo that's in there. Ultimately, sometimes our hiring processes don't line up with where academy dates are. So what I'm trying to do is we're currently 3 short of our 41 that we've discussed before in terms of our authorizations. We're authorized 41, and through generally accepted accounting principles that Jenny makes sure that she handles every year, we budget for 41 people throughout the entire year, which includes wages and benefits. Because we're going to be short in that category, but we are going to have a proportionality of we're going to have a little bit more overtime. But in the end, in 2025, we're still going to come under budget based upon those wages. I have 2 candidates currently that are sworn candidates, and we are conducting interviews this week and early next week with 10 other candidates that are not sworn, meaning they have to go to the academy. We talked about this when we were at the police department. I have acquired 2 spots with Waukesha County Technical College, which would bring our total to 42. I'd like to be able to offer 42 individual slots to basically be proactive in the hiring process. Now, when they go to the WCTC, generally speaking, and it's something that gets negotiated, they are at 75% wages when they're in the academy until they graduate. This would be a July start date with a December graduation date with those 2 candidates. Basically, if we hire them or get 2 people, I would like to be able to offer those because I have the slots available. If we wait, it could be till December to put somebody in the next class or be sending somebody to MATC in Milwaukee Gateway or whatever and required to pay lodging and so on and so forth. So I'm seeking temporary movement to 41 authorized. Now here's the rub. Alderman Decker, you hit me up 42. If for whatever reason I end up at 42 sworn at the beginning of next year, we have to have a way to make sure that we still have to budget for that in 2026, either through creative budgeting or a one-time budgeting source. But I will tell you what history has shown me in 20 years, there's always going to be some turnover in some capacity that once that happens through attrition, we'll go back to that 41. However, you know that through the budget cycle, I'm going to be asking for more next year or in that capacity. But in the short term, what I'm asking, I want to be able to hire and put 2 people in the academy starting in July.
So one of the things that I want to be clear on here is, if we knew it was just going to be this year, we can just do it. It gives us the policy, as long as it fits in the budget, we can, Chief and I can work that out and hire. My concern will be, and it's not really a concern, but I want to be clear with you guys that in the event that this does, we still have the 42nd spot in place starting January 1. Even if we don't, we probably would never use the budget number in there, but I have to plug something in the budget for next year to fill that. And this budget is going to be tight, that we're not going to have like extra, I'm not going to reduce a service in public works so we can fund this, knowing that we're not going to use that dollar amount, but we still have to put it in. So what I'm getting at is, if we get to that 42, number 40, or have that 42nd spot still open in January, and we think it's going to last any part of the year, say a month or 2, I'm going to have to put a one-time funding source in the budget again for just that, knowing we're never going to use it. But because it's a budget, you have to have money allocated in there. I just want to be clear with you on that. So, it's going to be like this year, where we put in about $100,000 in one-time money. We're not using that. We've already saved enough this year to date that we're not going to be touching that one-time money I put into the budget last year that we all argued about. That happens every year. But I just want to be clear with you guys. So when we go through the budget process, if I have to plug in one-time money for this position, you know what you're getting into advance, so we're not arguing this at budget time again.
For you're looking at this as the worst case scenario of plugging money. For me, I want to hang on to all my people, and I do want to be at 42. But history has shown I can't predict when a vacancy is going to occur.
And that's what I was going to address. This seems like a continuing issue throughout the past years, where we've been short-staffed, correct? When we are fully staffed, approximately how long are we fully staffed for before we end up being short-staffed again? Because it never seems like we're fully staffed for
until he mentions
too long.
it, and then we become short-staffed.
I just, in my 20 years here, this last year, up until just recently, was the longest I think we've been at, quote, full staff. And that was still with 2 in the academy. We went about a year without me being able to offer a job to somebody. But things happen. People move on for a variety of different reasons. But yeah, so
And now we're short by 3.
We're short by 3.
So we're budgeted this year for
This year
41.
This year we're budgeted for 41, but the
41.
dollar amounts,
Okay, gotcha.
but the dollar amounts we have in the budget, we can more than cover the position this year. I'm not worried about that. What I'm concerned about
Well,
is.
then we're budgeted too at 75% on 2 people.
Correct.
And the academy is, what, 5,000 for both of them, or 7,000 for both of them?
We get reimbursed from the state based on,
Oh, there's some
on the
reimbursement on that,
academy
right.
itself. So
That's
I'm
what I
not
thought.
overly, it's wages and benefits. And I don't have a person with that slot yet, so I don't know the total cost. But I can tell you, when you go down 3 short in a relatively short period of time, depending on where they are, you end up saving a ton in your budget over the long haul. Okay, so but it causes an adverse impact on quality of life at the police department in terms of covering with overtime, which is cash, but then there's that Goldilocks of where the perfect spot is. I will tell you, for 2025, we'll be under budget even with this authorization. But on the outside chance that we end up staying, and I say outside, at 42 sworn for the next 6 months or 8 months, we have to budget for that in 2026 in some capacity.
Any other questions? Alderman Decker.
What would be, could you give an example, like right now, of maybe a one-time funding source that we would likely tap for this if we needed to?
Same ones we used this year that we're not using. There were some fund balances, different fund balances that we have that I put into the budget last year that unless a catastrophe happens, we've already saved that amount this year through openings and positions and savings on some materials that we typically budget for, and we were able to save money on this year.
We've had several items come in under budget, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And doesn't that usually, correct me if I'm wrong, go into the general fund? And
Any budgetary surplus that happens from one year to the next rolls into fund balance for us. And then we typically would use that on a capital project, or it just stays in fund balance. But yeah, Alderman.
Question, because I'm new. What was like the dollar amount of the one-time funding that was plugged in? Like, what's the general?
There's two arguments on that. I
200 to 300,000.
No, 100 to 200,000. So 100,000 of it, we have one line in our budget that has to be there by ordinance that states that you have to have a contingency of, is it 1%? So 94,000, well, roughly 100,000, let's just say, that has to be a contingency. We've never, ever used that. So we have a one-time funding source in there because I know we're not going to use it. And then there was another 100,000 that we put in there to cover general operations. We're not going to use either one. I don't think the one I know we're not going to use, the other one we're not going to use. So the 100,000 is the way I view it, because that contingency thing that we have to fund, we never ever use it, so.
Thank you.
Alderman Hamel.
there is a minimum we need to keep, correct?
In,
Fund balance.
oh yeah, we're nowhere near that.
Okay, and how, yeah, it's a percentage. Do you know what that is?
I want to say 17%
And,
Yeah, we have,
of the prior year's expenditure.
and do you know what we're at? We're well over that, correct?
yeah, we're not even close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, our fund balance is very strong. That's why we have the bond rating we have. Alderman Price.
Thank you. Sorry, I have another question then. So asking for one more officer being contingent because we were 3 short. You want to offer 2 to sworn and then 2 to the academy. Knowing past history on the police department, why not try to get 2 extra? Because sometimes people don't make it out of field training, and then that puts you back down, and then that puts the city back behind the 8 ball again on hiring another person and then waiting X number of months for this to happen and then X number of months for that to happen. And I mean, honestly, like there was that huge fight at the beach in Pewaukee just recently that was awful. Like I wouldn't want that to happen here in Muskego, and we're not even going to people like be fully staffed until December when those people get out of the academy. It's like, why do we keep trying to be behind the 8 ball?
Well,
I'm not done.
sure.
Thanks. Why are we always behind the 8 ball trying to play catch up? Why not just try to figure out how to put some money in the budget so we can have a little extra padding for the police department to help the officers with their home, work, family life, to help our citizens with having a safer community, and also for not also like the city not always trying to have to like keep hiring because people move on or there's promotions and stuff. So that would be my question is, why don't we just think further into the future? Why are we just thinking short term all the time? All right, now I'm done.
So the point you're talking about right now is what we are talking about. We are being proactive by hiring that 1 extra account. You're asking, but you're asking for 1 more. However,
I only have 2 slots.
We only have 2 slots in the academy. And the only reason we have the 2nd slot in the academy is because someone just canceled and we grabbed it and I asked them to hold it until tomorrow morning for us. There aren't slots available.
Yeah, but what, did you have a 3rd candidate that would be?
I don't know yet because we have 2
For
in
your 10 more
backgrounds.
interviews, yeah.
We have 2 in backgrounds that are sworn candidates. We ran almost a side-by-side interview process. And then we have 10 candidates that are interviewing that are pre-sworn that have not been to the academy. Of those 10, we're hopeful to find 2 because those are the slots that I have available because I have to work with the area technical college to get them into those spots. And they were cancellations of like how it works.
Yeah,
because other agencies are trying to do the same thing that we're doing and they're
Yeah.
trying to gobble up spots.
Yeah, but of your 10 sworn interviews that you did you have a 3rd person you guys were interested in?
We have 2 sworn candidates that are currently in background.
Yeah, did you have a 3rd by chance that didn't have to go to the academy?
We
I'll
had
stop talking.
we had 2.
We only interviewed 4 people that were sworn. So of the 4,
thanks.
we accepted 2.
Okay.
The time that we're interviewing currently, they're the ones that went to the academy.
Okay.
there was actually more than 4. It's the Police and Fire Commission gets the first interviews and then they knock off some off the top. Then we have internal interviews and then the final interview comes to me. So we're
Alderman
trying
Wolf.
to be proactive. Yes.
When you go to the academy and they graduate and they come over, what is the employment, I hate to use the word life, but employment life of a candidate, normally a new hire? How long typically do they stay with a single department?
All over the board.
I was hired by you guys. You sent me to the academy.
Well,
So
you're the
it-
exception.
It varies.
So, and then sometimes we have good candidates times ourselves, so.
It varies from department to
But
department.
we're not like a training source, so then a year or two, they're moving on somewhere else. Because if we extend things, then you're almost better off looking for the guy that's looking to move and try to get them in without the expense of 75% salary and then an 18 months, I believe, probation period where a new hire, a existing officer is less time. It might travel with someone for 2 weeks in a car versus 3 months. I don't know the whole history of what you guys do.
If you take a look at even the memo, I strongly believe, and I know the mayor does, and if you're familiar with the process, probably an equal kind of a balance of you want experienced officers, but you also want to like keep your pool full of new recruits for a specific reason to make
Well, you
sure.
can blend, you can make them your own,
Correct.
the way you guys want
And
them, yeah.
Quite frankly, the other one is new recruits are a lot cheaper in the long run in terms of, not that I want to make it about dollars and cents, but the way the market is right now, if I hire an officer from Milwaukee Police Department or another police department, we give them lateral transfer benefits so they start on the higher end of the wage scale. And also understand they're a little bit older and will likely have more benefits that are going to be more of a cost. If they go through for the union contract, which is coming up this year, we have academy wage, and then you have 5 steps and 5 years of wage step increases before they're at max. The officers that I'm hiring from other departments usually come in at a different level and are a lot more expensive, and then also have a lot more accrued paid time off. A new recruit, as an example, yes, you're going to be investing in that 6 months where you don't have them, but then they start with a lot lower on the PTO scale and a lot lower on the wage scale, and it's a balance over your whole agency. And that's kind of what you're looking for, of like, not everybody's at the top end of the scale, but you have a balance and a cross-section across the board. Does that make sense?
In addition to that, that balancing act, the part of the new recruit being so important is we need to grow the profession. Stealing a police officer from New Berlin or Sturtevant or wherever doesn't create a new police officer in the pool that we're picking from. So and it's not just something Muskego has to do. All agencies have to start looking at putting kids through the academy again, because that's been a luxury we haven't had to do for years because the jobs were so sought after. Kids used to put themselves through the academy. One of the big savings a lot of times, and not always, is on health insurance. We're hiring officers that are still on their parents' health insurance, quite honestly, at times. So that's a huge savings.
Sure, and younger age, less costs.
Alderman Delegate.
Yeah, just one question. So if we get to the end of the year and we budget for this 42nd sworn officer, and let's say in that next year, you lose an officer. Since it's budgeted for, would we be looking to replace that 42nd officer?
Well, you can have my way.
I know what you.
And what
He wants a
it's going to be a
43rd.
balance. And I will tell you, without a surprise, you've heard me speak. I'm going to be asking for more bodies in some capacity and some creative budgeting regardless. I'm looking, yes, Alderman Bryce, we're looking at a short-term solution now. We owe our capital and personnel requests to the mayor by June or July 10th for a different type of process completely. This is the one time I want to be able to be proactive and put people that are percolating on the stove while we have other things going on. And when these vacancies do occur, it doesn't set us back a year.
To answer your question, Alderman, it depends when that would happen. So if it happened like February 1st, more than likely we wouldn't hire right away because it's too soon in our budget process to know when we're using one-time funding on that. Now, if this were to happen in like this time of year and we're in the same situation as this year where we've already made some good strides that maybe we can bring that forward, I would bring that back to you guys at that point, let you guys make the decision, but then have the data in front of you of here's where we are financially at this point. And I would give a recommendation one way or the other at that point. I guess either way, I'd bring it forward for a recommendation, but from a financial standpoint, it really depends on where it's going to come from as far as the timing of the year. I've been, this is going to be a discussion we're going to have sometime this year yet, and I have not been qualms about this. We need to do a public safety referendum, and I'm hoping that, we will demonstrate that to you for next year sometime. I'm not saying just because I want to do it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's going to be, you guys are going to have to have buy-in, and we're going to have lots of discussions on that and why, and that would all play into that as well. Alderman Wolf.
You touched on, I was going to bring it up on a follow-up before. Your contract is due when?
We are currently with our collective bargaining agreement.
It ends January. It ends at the end of the year. The new one would be for January 1. That doesn't mean, so the last contract,
I remember.
We settled it in June. The union has approached and wants to start negotiations, and we probably will start this year. So maybe we will have a contract in place by January. Maybe we won't. I don't know. It really depends how that goes.
It always involves back pay anyway. The current contract was how many years?
3 years, sir.
3 years, and that's pretty typical all the time?
No, typically th're 2. Yeah. If I can get another 3-year, I would do it because, it seems like if you do 2 years, it seems like you just got it settled and you're starting negotiations.
Kind of like running for alderman.
Kind of, yeah. Maybe you should look at doing that to 3 years too.
We talked about that, but it went nowhere.
All right, any other questions on this? Is everyone okay with this? I mean, this isn't really anything that, I don't need a resolution. I actually have the authority to do it. I just want to have you guys be on board with me on it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you for your time.
Sure. Discussion of, oh yeah, what is it? Let me just check where we have it. Yeah, I know. Okay. Discussion of Test Corners fire pumper contract. Alderman Dilgey asked to have this on here. There is a memo in your packet. I will hand this over to Alderman Dilgey and let you go where you want this.
So the reason I brought this up again, if you guys remember, we weren't provided the purchase agreement until we were actually in meeting debating this. After the meeting, I looked it over about a half dozen times, and there was an assertion made in the meeting regarding prepayment for the truck, freezing the cost of the truck during the course of the build. And as I read over that purchase agreement, I didn't see that anywhere in there. And I think there were maybe 4 or 5 different places where they discussed how the price of the truck can increase. Now, based on what the mayor provided from the Test Corners Volunteer Fire Department, where they don't foresee needing us to cover a dime over the $950,000 we appropriated for them. I do have a little bit of concern yet that, and I know you brought up clause 7, which is the producer price index or inflationary environment. But there's also chassis price volatility, component price volatility, a whole bunch of other things that could increase the price of that truck. And I'm wondering is there a number where the fire department isn't going to be, hey, we think we can cover it? Is there a number where they're going to come back to us at some point and say, hey, this turned out more expensive than we anticipated?
So looking at the letter of the contract, and so I pointed it out before I even brought that to council to the fire department. I'm like, well, does this prepayment now preclude this on here? And if you want, I could show you the text later, but it was between the fire chief and I, and he said yes. What later came to be when this was all blowing up and talking is their belief with their salesperson is, and the conversation they had with their salesperson is, this clause has never been executed they have it in their contract because it's required for their bonding. The manufacturer is required for their bonding. They've never executed that part of the contract for any customer, not just Test Corners, but for any customer.
And that's the clause 7.
That's the clause 7, correct. Now, spelling this out, looking at a worst case scenario, because I like looking at worst case scenarios and seeing what it would have. If you look at, there's only been twice in our history, I guess in the last, and shouldn't be giving exact numbers here, so don't take these as exact numbers, but approximately in the last 20 years, it's only that 5% they're talking about has only happened twice in the last 20 years in our economy. So that means it does happen, it just hasn't, it's only happened twice. Now, if it does happen, say, and the kicker I believe was 5%, that contract, and the contract is, I want to point out, between Test Corners and the manufacturer, not us, but let's just say it goes to 6%. That doesn't mean they pay 6% more, they pay 1% more. Now, let's just say it doubles and it goes up to 10%. So that means they have to pay 5% more. It's about $50,000. And I had this conversation with Dave Van Zeelen when I, like, worst case scenario, say it's $50,000 on it, which it's never doubled like that, but you're not saying anything can't happen. He said that wouldn't be a problem. So.
And they don't have any concerns about the other areas of the agreement?
They don't have a concern about, in a scenario that's never happened where that would actually double and they'd have to pay that 5%. They didn't have a concern with that.
Okay. And then it looks like in our packet, you also provided another instance where we chose to prepay for equipment. I know it's not an apples to apples.
It's not apples to apples by any means, but we have a history of that numerous times. Actually, I'm kind of shocked we didn't do it with the ladder truck that was $1.5 million that we bought in 2020. But numerous times we prepaid for the equipment. Now, that one in 2014 that I used as the example, the truck was only, I think, $590,000. Again, don't quote me. It was $500 and some $1,000. The savings was only $22,000 at the time. But also the wait on the truck was only 18 months because that's the normal build time. This truck is still only going to take 18 months to build. The problem is there's such a line ahead of us that it'll probably ultimately be 4 years on it. So looking at the 4-year rate of return on it, I had Jenny give me the numbers of what we've had for interest rates over the last 5 years. On average, it was it's in the memo, but 2-point-some%. We're getting over 4% on this one, and that's if it takes the maximum of 4 years to get. So from a rate of return, it's good. Furthermore, we have a contract with Test Corners, a private entity. Our contract states that we owe them the $950 this year. So we give them the $950. When and how they get the truck or whatever, they just have to be spending it on a truck. I don't think we even, technically, I'm not sure we have the option of holding it back, investing it ourselves, and paying the higher price later. And that's the opinion of our attorney.
All right. And the other thing, one of the things we were missing that I was happy to see when you sent out our agenda packet is that financial analysis. Like, this is what it would be this way. This is what it would be the other way. It's a lot easier to make a decision that way. So
it's a learning process. I think you guys have seen over the last few months, I'm giving you more and more information because I want to make sure you guys have all the tools in front of you. I'm still learning. So,
what else?
There's also been a question raised from somebody else about the ownership of the vehicles. So we have a dissolution agreement. I will send you guys all copies of that. I have drafted a memo on it that kind of breaks it down, but I've got Jeff reviewing the memo to make sure it's factually correct. It's just might be easier for you guys to read the memo and then read the contract than trying to read a contract. So you'll get both. But essentially, every piece of equipment that Test Corners owns, including buildings, actually all their property, let's just say, reverts over to the city without any cost if we terminate the contract for legal reasons, meaning like the state doesn't allow volunteer fire departments, performance, if they don't meet matrices that provide services that are required for a community our size, or if they decide they don't want to do it anymore. Then it gets turned over to us without any cost or anything. If we break the contract essentially for no cause, what we owe them is any of the equipment that they owned prior to the original agreement in 1999, which I believe that pumper is like one of the few things, and one of their buildings, we have to pay them fair market value for. If we want it, we can also just say, no, you guys keep it. And we have to fund a scholarship fund for $125,000. That scholarship is for training for firefighters, EMTs, or police officers. And that's essentially the dissolution agreement in a nutshell, but I will get you the full text of that as well.
Last thing, and we talked about this briefly, from a philosophical about paying for something over time versus the one-time payment and the fairness to the taxpayer. As you know, if people move into the community after that check is written, they're not paying for that truck. People move out of the community after the check is written, they've paid for a truck that they'll never benefit from.
So I think that's a budgetary conversation that we will have. I think we're going to have that conversation this year with roads, starting with our next committee of the whole. I brought that up to you. I think I brought up to others of you that there's a philosophy, and I actually do subscribe to it. Borrowing is not always bad, especially in a community where a community is paying for something that has a long life. So let's just take a road, for example. A road's got a 20-year life. We've been fortunate enough that we've been getting by, although we are way behind now, on our roads by essentially paying cash for them for the most part. The problem with paying cash for them is today's taxpayers are the ones who are paying cash for it. And that road's going to last 20 years, and they may move out of the community tomorrow, and the next guy moves in, and he's getting that road essentially for free. When you bond for it over 20 years or 10 years or whatever you're doing, the people that are actually using that road or getting the benefit of it are paying for it over time. Now, there is a cost to that in interest rates, but we are a municipality and we are able to bond at a very reasonable rate, even with higher interest rates today. So the argument can be made, and it's one I do subscribe to, is for debt for things like that have the long life. I actually think you should borrow for them instead of using operating capital for that. This fire truck we use landfill funds for. You can continue to do that. You can do a mix on it, but I think that's a conversation that we have through capital budget and decide how to pay for things. In the future, in the past, with our previous finance director, we would have things on there and she would just essentially plug in, here's how we're paying for it. And we really never talked about that, but I think we should have more conversations on that.
Yeah, but the way she did it in the past kept our ratings. I mean, we were able to do that, and fire trucks were $500,000 to $700,000. Now they're $1 million, and we've paid for them in the past with landfill money as well. But now we're up to doubling that money, depending on what we're doing or what we're buying.
There's lots of demands on that money nowadays.
What's that?
There's a lot more demands on that money, landfill money, than we had in the past.
Right. I mean, there's more. Just the dollars is inflation alone for 10 years, 20 years. And just to clarify, you said that basically people that are living here now are paying for the truck, and if they move, they lost that money and a new person comes in and they get it for free, basically. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's what
and I think like you said, that goes to anything. It goes to our dump truck, it goes to our police car, it goes to this building that we're sitting in. It goes to your salary. It goes to everything that we do. So it really balances out somehow.
It really doesn't go to everything. I think we should be more judicious on what we do. Like
I just use a generalization.
I get that, and I'm doing this more for people watching at home. The police car that lasts 2 or 3 years, that would be a good source for using landfill funds for, because it doesn't have a long life on it. I mean, years ago, there's still a joke around the community that back in the 70s, we took 20-year bonds to pay for like 3 Javelin squad cars. I mean, those cars lasted 2 years and you paid for them over 20 years. I mean, that clearly is an example where you shouldn't be borrowing for some things and you should be paying for it. But there are things where, I think looking at if they have a long life, I think spreading that out over time makes sense.
But the only dilemma there is that you could have quite a few items spread out over a long period of time, and think of your own credit card.
You have to be
think
responsible.
of your own credit card, how fast that can build up.
You have to be responsible in how you do it. I'm not talking about using
all you
a
have
credit card.
is payments out
but
there.
I'm talking about a mortgage. There's a difference.
And then all of a sudden you use that $1 million we had sitting aside from the landfill for something else, and then now we created 4 more things at $1 million each that we're paying for. So yeah, it is a fine balance. I mean, if we can pay for things, we're better off. But
I think it's a conversation we should have on certain items.
Now, the other thing, just to be fair, I believe a citizen sent out an email to all of us, And this is the opportunity now, I believe everybody read it, if they have some concerns or something to bring up, because, this is a hard enough job to do because of public input. And this would be the time to bring up anything that the public sends to you that you'd like to bring up. So with that being said, I take this pretty serious. I can't please everybody. I vote on things that people like and people don't dislike. And I don't want to be persecuted either way for liking or disliking things. And with that being said, I want to be straightforward and honest with everybody that I take this stuff seriously. I look at it. I vote what's in the best interest, I believe, for what the city has or needs or wants or whatever. So I'm just going to just bringing out the point that, we receive emails from people in our community, and we all received them, so we all saw it. I just want to make sure that I'm not always the person that has to bring this forward. A lot of times I bring these things up and get discussions going, and then the train starts rolling and it gets worse, or sometimes it gets better. So I don't want to always be the go-to person, and that's my goal. This is the time to bring up something. If you guys have something to say, bring it up, ask some questions, answer the people's questions on the emails, and vote the way that you think things should go with input from people as well. And that's what I try to do. So if people think I'm doing it wrong, then I shouldn't be an alderman. But if you think I'm doing it right, then back me. I'm pretty vocal. I bring things to the front. I try to look over everything 100%. I try to be prepared for the meetings, and I vote that way. And I vote for the best interest, first of all, to keep a clean and safe environment that we live in. And that's number one. And number two would be keeping our taxes in line. And above all that, I am a citizen that lives in the community, and that's what I am first. I want lower taxes. I want the best of everything, and I don't want anything in my backyard, and that's what we all want. So with that being said, this is your opportunity now to bring up anything anybody wants to bring up.
Well, under this agenda item.
As far as, right, but that's what this, but that's what this email, and this has been being dragged out for a while. We need to either do something about it or put it to bed.
Well, and let's for those watching at home, let's be perfectly clear what this is. I mean, this isn't just a citizen out there. This is former Mayor Kathy Cheverati.
Well, on this email, to be fair, because I do have other people calling me about stuff too.
But I'm just being clear about the one you're talking about that we all received this week, criticizing specifically me for doing things that actually has been standard practice, including with her throughout her term. So I think it's more of a political stunt than anything else. I don't think anyone up here is doing anything besides what they believe is best for the community. There's no one, some of us will have difference of opinions on things, but I will never accuse any of you of doing something for yourself or for betterment of your political office or anything. I really think, I truly do believe that, everyone that's here right now has that belief that, they're here to serve the community, and as Rob said, you're citizens first and politicians second. It does get a little disheartening when you have somebody backseat driving on stuff that us as a council have discussed, and we're not doing anything different than when they got to make the decision. So,
with that being said, I try not to look at these emails and not to put you or her or anybody else on the spot as criticism. I mean, first of all, you shouldn't be up here if you can't handle criticism, because there's a lot of it out there. And that's why I don't do Facebook and all this other junk, because you get on that stuff and you can see all kinds of things. But I look at it for the information factor, and if there's something interesting in there, this is your time to bring it forward, and that's my point. So.
All right, anything else on this from anyone? We answer all your questions?
Yeah, and then some of that stuff, because it got missed in the last time we talked about it, I just wanted some of that stuff on the public record.
Sure.
So that's it. That's all I got.
All right, Alderman Wolf.
Okay, one thing that I thought was interesting in here is that somewhere she said that we should look at I'm going to paraphrase, the contract at a cow meeting. I don't know if we should.
The dissolution agreement, which is what I had talked about, that you will all be getting a copy.
Okay, and that's, I just want to bring that out because I think that's an interesting,
Yeah, I think and actually, I think it's interesting. Yeah, you should all be intimately knowledgeable about that. And I know about the dissolution agreement, not because I'm mayor. I knew about it when I was, from being an alderman 20 years ago, and it's something that you should all, be aware of. And
and we have
know
new
that's out
people
there.
on here too as well.
Right. Yeah, so, yeah, absolutely. All right. Continuing on, notice a closed session. Can you read that?
Following conclusion of consideration of the above portion of its regularly scheduled agenda, the Common Council will meet to vote on a motion to convene in closed session for discussion, action relative to the following: discussion of medical, social, or personal histories of an employee and/or dependent, discussion of health insurance contract, and to take such further action as may be appropriate with respect to such matters. A closed session for the above purpose is authorized pursuant to the provisions of the following Wisconsin statutes. 1. Wistat Section 19.85, paren 1, paren F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations. And 2, Wistat Sections 18.85, paren 1, paren G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. And 3, Wistat Section 18.85, paren 1, paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Upon conclusion of the closed session, the Common Council will reconvene in open session to consider its public agenda, including motions to recommend approval or rejection of the above listed deliberations or any of the public agenda items that have not been acted upon.
Question?
I need to get on the floor first. I need a motion and then a second.
Motion to move into closed session.
Second.
And then those statutes were 19.85, not 18.85.
So just for those watching at home, one of the I'm just going to clarify, we are going to be talking about our health insurance plan and some future options. The reason we're doing this in closed session is because it will be talking about possibly about some health issues that some of our employees or possibly their dependents currently have. We will not be taking any action or making any decisions tonight. This is going to be one of a number of conversations we're going to have on healthcare. This, I anticipate probably being the only one that has to go in closed session because you need the background of it and it's sensitive data. That is it, that we will not, like I said, when we do actually make a decision in the future and future discussions will all be in open session, and a lot of what tonight is talked about will also be talked about then. But there is some sensitive data that's why we're in closed session. Alderman.
I think that basically answered my question. I was concerned about, I don't want to be bumping up against a HIPAA violation.
That's why we're doing it in
Okay.
closed. All right?
Yes.
All right.
Roll call vote.
Alderman Wolf,
Yes.
Hamel,
Yes.
Decker,
Yes.
Bryce,
Yes.
Dolge,
Yes.
and Madden. 6 in favor, motion
All right.
carries.
We are in closed session. We're only going to be coming out to adjourn. Everyone have a great night.